Holy City Center Radio is episode 359, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, April 7th, 2025. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. We've got a great episode for you today. Get you off on a good start to your week. It's a Monday. We've got an interview episode. Like I said, this is going to be a fun one. It's a nice way to start your week, and I hope you have an amazing week ahead. If you need to find any plans, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar. You can find all sorts of stuff going on in town. You know, as we get in the spring months now and into the summer, there's going to be so much going on. I feel like there's been so many event announcements that happen over these last few weeks, and they just keep on coming. You know, we're really picking things up. So lots to do. Go check it out. Hope all is well in your world. Today's episode, as I mentioned, is an interview. It's with Kimball Brienza, who is with Oku, specifically the managing partner of Oku, the restaurant on King Street. It is celebrating its 15th anniversary this year. March 18th specifically was the day that they marked the 15 years. But obviously, the entire year they'll be celebrating. It has grown, which you'll hear about, from that King Street location 15 years ago to they're on the verge of opening their 10th restaurant in the Southeast, and Kimball will discuss all that in the interview. He also has a great story from how he started, in the restaurant industry to where he is now, and has a lot of good advice and insight as it relates to the food and bev industry, especially here in the Charleston area. So I really enjoy talking to him. He's someone I've known about for many, many years. He had an online presence, persona perhaps, that we discussed, and that's when I first learned his name and who he was. We talk about that a little bit, but the entire interview is very good. I had a great time talking with him, and congrats to Oku, which is part of the Indigo Road Hospitality Group, celebrating their 15th anniversary. You may remember I spoke to Steve Palmer about how Oak, another restaurant under this group, celebrated their 20th anniversary this year. So they just continue to be consistent here in Charleston, and the expansion across the Southeast. It's pretty incredible what they've done over the last 20-ish years as a group. Going back to Oku, we mentioned it briefly in the interview, but in January of last year, Kimball and the aforementioned Steve Palmer, who is the founder of Indigo Road, they were named Outstanding Restaurateur. I should say they were semifinalists for Outstanding Restaurateur by the James Beard Foundation, which is an incredible honor. Whether winning an award or even being nominated is just, for those who don't know, James Beard, the awards that foundation gives out is like the Oscars, the Grammys of the food and beverage world. So, certainly an honor that they were nominated together last year. So congrats to them, a late congrats. But yes, obviously a great restaurant in Charleston. 15 years on and still going strong. And here is Kimball to talk about it. And as promised, joining me now is Kimball Brienza. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kimball. I'm excited to talk to you about yourself and your journey with Oku.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be joining you today.
Oh, I appreciate that. And so Oku back on March 18th celebrated 15 years on King Street, which blew my mind because I feel like it wasn't quite that long ago that it opened, but time is flying by. I'm sure you feel the same way about that.
Yeah, 15 years. I mean, it's been an amazing journey. It's been a pleasure to see the restaurant mature and age with grace. And, we look forward to another 15 years.
So let's talk about that journey. We'll start with you first. What is your background? You can go as far back as you want or pick up wherever, just so people have a better idea of who you are and, what your history has been in the food and bev world, especially here in Charleston.
Yeah. I mean, so it's all I've ever done is hospitality since I was 13 years old. My first job was a dishwasher at my, one of my best friend's parents' restaurant in my hometown of Cooperstown, New York.
Okay.
I really fell in love with the business. I looked at that as just the first opportunity to get a job. And I soon found out this is where I belonged. I feel like the hospitality industry at such a young age made such a huge impact on me. And, it taught me a lot of life lessons at a very early age. It also, made me grow up fairly quickly, for good and bad, points, I would say. Um, I fell in love with all sides of it. I fell in love with the human interaction side, which is, really the true meaning of hospitality, how we make people feel. And then also the culinary side. I did about 2 years of culinary arts school, just from falling in love with the industry. There were some really great chefs from the Culinary Institute of America that were running that restaurant at the time. And they saw something in me. I think it was my big personality and just my willingness to work hard and learn at a young age. So they poured a lot of attention into me and taught me a lot of things. And um, so I just, that's all I really ever wanted to do. When all of my friends were going off to college and were in their college years, I went right into the workforce. And, I had some friends we were all home in Cooperstown, and they wanted to, they were transferring to College of Charleston. And they said, "Hey, what are you doing in the fall when we're all done with our summer jobs up in New York and everyone's going to go back to college?" I said, "I have no idea." And they said, "Well, why don't you come to Charleston, be our third roommate, and we're not going to live on campus, and there's tons of opportunity for restaurants in Charleston." So I moved down to Charleston when I was about 19 and absolutely fell in love with the city. And from there, I just worked my way up to, I guess, where I am now. So I've been in Charleston for over 20 years. I started as a line cook, pizza cook at Mellow Mushroom when it was located on King Street.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, I had the time of my life. I was 19, 20, just making pizzas and partying and having fun and learning about, the industry in a bigger scale. I came from a fairly smaller town in upstate New York. So, but I did realize at that point, after a few years working for Johnny and Michael, the owners at the time of Mellow Mushroom, that there was more out there, and I wanted to make more money. I wanted to learn more about the industry and further my skills. So I understood pretty quickly I needed to get into fine dining. And at that time, it wasn't like it is today where, everyone's begging for staff. It was, those jobs are really hard to get. You couldn't just walk into a high end restaurant in Charleston in the early 2000s and get a waiter job. It was pretty tough. You had to know somebody, you had to have a ton of experience. But I did end up finding my way through a restaurant by the name of Carolina's,
Oh, yeah,
which
sure.
is, yeah, located down on the water closer to the Battery. And they took a chance on me. I think, again, just the willingness to learn, the willingness to work hard, and my personality. They gave me a shot to be a server. So I had no idea what I was doing. I had to learn a lot in that way. And but so as my career progressed in that sense, and I went from being a server there to a bartender to a bar manager to an assistant general manager. I knew that I was needing to kind of move on to the next step. So I found my way to Oak Steakhouse. And that's where Steve and I met. He at the time came in to basically just consult on the restaurant and analyze, kind of the profits and the functionality of the restaurant. I was there just as kind of a shift manager, waiter. Um, and he kind of reshaped, I think, Oak, and which has kind of allowed it to flourish through the years. And I think they just hit their 20-year anniversary, so congratulations to
Yes.
them. But Steve, I'll thank him. Steve really changed my life. He saw something in me as well, and gave me the opportunity to get my first general manager position at Oku when we were opening that restaurant. So I served as the GM for 5 years at the King Street Oku location. And just another nod to Steve and our partners Mike and Andy on the growth and the development of our teams and our people and our company. I think I was also at that time wrapped up in having such a great time. King Street was developing and growing. Nightlife was being implemented on Upper King. More restaurants were coming to the area, and I was just having a ball. But I knew somewhere deep down that there was more for me. And I probably was needing to start to look for the next step. But before I could make that decision for myself, Steve and our partners offered me a partnership in Oku as a company, which has also just changed my life and you know developed me in ways I could never have imagined. And if I asked myself where I'd be today, 15 years ago, I don't know if I would say I'm here. So it's been pretty magical. I became a partner, and then we started to expand. The first city we went to was Atlanta, and we opened that restaurant as the second Oku. And one thing led to the other, and the popularity of Oku started to really grow. As you probably know, in the Southeast, if you live in Charleston, Atlanta, or Charlotte, you visit all those different cities for sporting events, concerts, other restaurants. So the popularity of Oku started to really get some traction. I think people would come to Charleston and see that we were doing something different than the average sushi restaurant in their city. And so it just kind of snowballed from there. And we're looking at opening our 10th Oku location in Tampa, Florida here by the end of the summer.
Wow.
So we've really grown the brand, and the company along with that has grown. Generally we'll open an Oku in a new city, and shortly after that, either Oak Steakhouse or Indaco, our Italian concept, will come shortly thereafter. And we found that going to these different cities outside of Charleston, where our hub is, where our foundation and all the support and our home office and accounting and HR are located here in Charleston, to have more restaurants in each city just creates this synergy and this really family feel. So so I am currently today the managing partner of the Oku restaurants, and just in continuing to enjoy life and continuing to grow and learn more every day.
Yeah, what a great story, not just yours, but the restaurant and the restaurant group. I mean, you started out like a lot of people do. One of your first jobs, dishwasher. I was a dishwasher in high school for a few years, and then you get all the way to where you are now. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, man, and that's a tough job for anybody
Oh
listening.
yeah.
Take care of your dishwashers. They, it's something. It's a crazy job, but your restaurant cannot function without that position, and it is an entry level role. But for somebody back there to have nothing but dirty plates slid towards their direction all night, scraping off leftovers into the trash and
Hmm.
washing the plates, and it's just such an important role. So we really try to take care of our stewards, and talk to them a lot and create relationships with them and try and take care of them as much as possible.
For sure. A lot of stuff you're saying, it sounds very familiar. I actually you mentioned Steve a few times. That's Steve Palmer, for those who don't know. And I spoke to him on this podcast, so some of you may remember that. And you're echoing a lot of the same things that he said on that show about, the whole team, how everyone's important and has a very specific role, and how everyone should work together. And also, just how your thoughts about hospitality and how important it is, how you interact and treat your customers. So you guys are very in line with all those philosophies.
Yeah, it's great. And he may have mentioned something about this, but our company really is trying to do the industry differently. There's still so many bad habits out there from operators, as far as just I think how they treat their employees. And so
Mm,
it's funny. Steve's one of his biggest mantras is the employee is more important than the guest. And a lot of people would be like, "What, really? I thought the customer was always right." But at
hmm.
the end of the day, a happy chef makes more delicious food. And we can't take care of our guests properly if we're not taking care of our teams. So that's one of our biggest is goals, is to create the best working environment. If you're going to work in our industry, that hopefully working for one of our restaurants is the best experience you've ever had. And we're not perfect like anyone else, and we'll get things wrong, but um, I think trying to transform the industry, when I was coming up through the ranks, we saw a lot of maybe what not to do, or something in our gut said, I don't think this feels right, but not everyone was showing people what to do properly. So I think that's one of our biggest things in development is just being better people and working on ourselves and trying to create a better environment for our teams.
And this may, have some overlap of what we talked about so far, but Oku, 15 years old, obviously, it's going strong, not just here, but as you mentioned, about to open the 10th location. Despite all that growth, which pretty quick growth too, what has remained consistent since day one, opening the doors on King Street? What is still the same across not just here, but across all the Oku locations?
I think for us, it's not only, like I said before, making sure we're creating an environment where everyone feels safe, comfortable, and happy to come to work, but also, I think the hospitality side to our guests, making sure people are, like the biggest thing for me is, when you go out to eat as a guest, you want to feel seen and you want to feel appreciated. So, as we grow, I think it's important that we're always trying to make sure that our guest connection is there. I feel unfortunately that in our industry, the table touch or the manager touch has really almost disappeared. I mean, I
Mm,
can't tell you the last time I went to a restaurant in multiple cities, and nicer places where I've had the maitre d or the manager come up to us mid meal and say, "Hey, just wanted to check in and say thank you for being here. How are things? Is there anything we can do for you?"
mhm.
Or just the basic thanks for being here tonight. A lot of times, I'm always when I go out to dinner, I'm studying what's going on. It's almost like a hindrance to my wife. She's always like, "Can you just pay attention to me for a second?"
Yeah,
So,
you're always
but
working.
I'm looking at the operation. I'm a student of the game,
Mm,
and I'm always looking for that person, right? The person who's in charge, the person wearing the sports coat, the one walking around checking on people, glad handing the regulars. And a lot of times I don't see that. So one of the things that we've tried to really um, keep at the top of our list to remain important is the guest connection, and whether
sure.
that be through your server or the manager on duty, just making sure that we're talking to the guests and trying to connect with them. Also the quality of our fish. We definitely are sourcing the most fresh seasonal things. So I would say those things, just making sure the product quality and consistency there. We've always said the mark of a great restaurant is consistency. You come to a restaurant and you have something that tastes great and looks awesome. You want to come back and get the same thing, a month later. So consistency is key, and then also the guest interaction.
And on the flip side, besides the obvious, there's multiple locations now, but say someone who came to Oku on King Street a few years back or, whatever it may be, is there anything that they would notice that's different? Anything, that you've changed along the way that they, or is it pretty much, hey, like you just said, consistency, we've essentially been the same, just some minor changes here. Has there been anything big changes besides, again, like expanding out?
Well, we like to give the chefs some creative freedom. There's some core items that are just tried and true and are on the menu because we would have probably an uproar if we remove certain things. But we
Sure.
like to try and tweak and change our menus slightly seasonally.
Hmm.
Um, but also the decor of the restaurant has changed. I think the spirit is always going to be the same: the oversized lampshades, the exposed brick.
Hmm.
But we have, over time and just wear and tear, we've tightened things up. We've replaced equipment and we've modernized certain things. For example, the back of the bar itself, the cocktail bar, we used to have like almost like a frosted glass behind the bottles that was backlit with like a purple glow,
Hmm.
which again, I think in the the early 2000s, mid 2000s, that was kind of a cool look, but we've kind of gone away from that and gone with more of like an antiqued mirror look with a little bit of a different uplighting. So there are some, I think, aesthetically different approaches that we've taken to modernize and just stay more a contemporary with the space. But I think you will, whenever you come to Oku and any of the other Okus that we've opened, I think you'll feel the spirit is very much the same.
And, you mentioned the 10th location is coming here, whether it's further expansion, if you even can talk about anything like that, or anything else involving Oku. What's in its future? You're 15 years in. What are you envisioning as, the next 15 years goes by?
Well, we've got a couple more leases to execute in the state of Florida,
Nice.
West Palm Beach, Winter Park, Orlando area,
Hmm.
and Naples, Florida. So those will all come online in the next 2 to 3 years. And I'll tell you, we've been like everybody. Everyone has an opinion on something. Some people would say, well, we think it's become too big of a company, or it's become more of a chain. But in my head, we look at it like we're giving people opportunity to grow, to move, to expand,
Mm.
their life and their career. I've already seen this play out with people who started in our company as a server, who have moved up and become a manager, who have then moved on to open one of our new locations as a general manager or as a chef. We hired a guy in our Jacksonville location to be the chef. And he and his family have moved to Tampa to open up that concept and also oversee another bar program and their food program upstairs on the rooftop. Our chef currently in Charleston moved from DC to become the executive chef here in Charleston. So, with growth comes a lot of great opportunity and growth for people in their personal life and career. So, that I think for me, as we expand, that's something that I really enjoy and look forward to seeing is different people taking on different roles and growing their career.
And shifting gears slightly, you mentioned before, especially when you first got here, when Oku started, you said a lot about partying and having fun, and it struck a memory. And correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like this was like early days of like Twitter and Instagram and stuff. I remember this going around. Wasn't there? You had like a nickname like Party Panda. Am I
Oh yeah,
remembering this
man,
right?
Party Panda. I've kind of had to retire the Party Panda
Yeah, that was my next
as
question.
I've gotten into my 40s, and I'm really trying to keep track of my health a little bit
Yeah, I
closer.
hear you.
Um, I'll be vulnerable for a minute, but I did have a little bit of a health scare, and I've got some heart issues that have come up in the last year,
Mm,
and honestly, probably due to a lot of really hard years on my body as an industry person.
sure,
Working hard but playing harder. I was always able to balance that lifestyle, but I think it takes a toll on people, and I think that's part of the reason Steve has moved forward with his program of Ben's Friends and everything.
absolutely.
But yeah, the Party Panda. I mean, he still lives inside. He's still my spirit animal. But yeah, we in the early days of Oku, I think when we opened Oku on King Street, we were slightly ahead of its time for where Charleston was as a food scene, and I think where
Sure,
the American palate is. I think there's way more people who are open to eating sashimi and raw fish and sushi now than were 15 years ago. So we over the time, and that's why I say it's been such an honor and a blessing to see Oku mature into the restaurant it is today. In the early days, I think we opened with a very um, raw forward menu, and I
mm,
think there wasn't as big of a acceptance to that in Charleston, so we had to tweak the menu. We weren't as busy as we are now. I mean, Charleston, as you know, has blown up as far as a tourist scene, and more people have
absolutely.
moved here. But we also implemented a little bit of a nightlife scene for many years, where we would do a DJ and almost like a nightclub on the
Hmm.
weekends after dinner service was over. Um, which was great for the sales, but there's good and bad to all things. It beat the building up, which is probably why we've renovated it 2 to 3 times. And also, I think for a lot of serious diners at that time, 2012, 13, 14, I think because we offered a nightlife aspect, I think some of the more mature diners of Charleston saw it as that, and
Okay.
not quite as much of a serious restaurant as it has become today. I mean, last year we were nominated as a semifinalist for a James Beard Award for the restaurant on King Street, Oku, which is like one of the biggest honors for any restaurant person. So to see where
Absolutely.
it's come from where it was. But yeah, we definitely we were part of the pioneers of the nightlife of Upper King Street in Charleston. I mean, you look at the nightclubs now, like we have Trio, we have Republic, obviously, who kind of own the market there with the nightclubs. And at the time there was Deco, and
Yep.
but there were places like, I think, Parcel 43 or 42. They
Yeah.
at the time
Yes.
was called Fish, and that
Yep.
was a seafood restaurant that also did a nightlife on the weekends. And I remember people that would come to our restaurant for the nightlife, and it was just honestly, it was like the goal. I always refer to that time as like the golden era of Upper King Street in Charleston.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you there. It was a lot of fun in that time,
Oh
and
yeah.
like in those places you mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. Now, Is there anything else that we didn't get to or I didn't ask as it relates to Oku or Indigo Road that you just want people to know? Anything, I don't know, events, anything that, I just didn't ask about that might be coming up, or you just want folks to know about your work?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was an honor to be invited onto the podcast, and I guess the only thing I could say to the industry people out there is, um, I think the reason I've been successful in the industry is because I stayed at it. I think more and more nowadays we have a lot of short-term employees, people who want to work part-time, and a lot of people who I think still don't see our industry as a real career. It's always been what I'm doing for now or until I
Mhm.
get a real job. But I'll tell you, all the years of me living on my own without help from my family and supporting myself from being a pizza cook all the way up to being a partner in 10 restaurants. My paycheck is very real and it always has been. And the industry is, a viable long-term career option. Restaurants aren't just going to disappear one day, and there always going to be a need for a great restaurant. And I think one of my things that I would love to, speak to with at least some of the younger generation coming up through is it's a hard industry, but it's a really fun industry. But you have to stay at it. Things get tough. And I think a lot of times people are more than willing to, throw in the towel and say, this is too much or, but if you look at the grand scheme and I can reflect on my career, those moments I've had that were challenging, they were really just a blip in a moment of time, in the big picture. So, my thing is, it's a very real industry. There's great career opportunities. It's a fun time, and just stay with it. When it gets tough, don't just quit. There's more to it, and I think there's a bigger value in our industry to loyalty and staying with something a little bit longer. Our like I said, when I was the GM of Oku Charleston, I was there for about 5 years. That's a rarity to see nowadays. We're lucky if we see a general manager stay in their role for a year and a half to 2 years. So, for somebody who started as just a waiter and grew into being an owner of restaurants, there's, just stick with it and work hard. I think to be successful in our company, you just need to show up, work hard, and be nice, and you'll be successful.
Well said. And thank you so much for joining me. It was great speaking with you. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks a lot for just telling, sharing your journey and talking about Okus as well. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem, who produces each and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. Of course, a big thank you goes out to Kimball Brienza for joining me. It was a great chat. I really enjoyed it. I hope you all did too. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, but I'll be checking in with you before the week is out. Until then, good night and good luck.